1990's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the live-action debut of the comic book series of the same name. It was a massive hit at the time of its release and has been looked fondly upon by modern audiences. In this video, I will be reviewing the 1990s movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The pursuit of a movie adaptation of the comic book series began in the late 1980s. This was a time when studios were hesitant to take the risk of adapting a superhero movie. Even though the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles property has already been massively successful in its other adventures. The only studio to take a chance on the property was New Line Cinema. With a budget of $13 million, they saw a box office of $202 million. The idea of the mutated reptiles started in 1983 with the co-creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. It started as a bit of a joke between the two artists until they officially released their first issue of the comic in 1984, under their own company name, Mirage Studios. The overnight success of this independent comic made distributors want more. Eastman and Laird delivered, now celebrating financial success. The original black and white comic was mature in both origins and execution. This tone of the Turtles would change after Eastman and Laird were approached by Playmate Toys. Playmate Toys wanted to partner with Mirage Studios to capitalize on the success of the comic, but they had some demands. They were interested in making a toy line but wanted to pair it with a cartoon. This partnership is part of what began Eastman and Laird's series of compromises and disagreements with each other and other collaborators. The cartoon from 1987 is what brought in a lot of what is commonly associated with the Turtles. The different colored masks, the catchphrases, and the iconic love of pizza. It's iconic, but the massive tone shift from edgy comics to a very kid-friendly cartoon made it a bit disorienting for the creators and the fans of the original comics. When making the movie, director Steve Barron took inspiration from both the cartoon and the original comics. Steve Barron was very interested in this project and very passionate about making a proper adaptation that would pay its respects to its source material. A quote from Eastman from a Hollywood Reporter discussion. "We had our doubts until we met Steve Barron. He came in and had gone through the comic books and picked out scenes from issue number 1 and number 10 and said, 'Here's the movie.' Steve Barron was such a fan of the comic book series and was aware of the animated series. He said, 'We need to make a hybrid.'" The tone and aesthetic of the movie is very blended. The tone of the movie remains consistently changing between emotional scenes and comedic moments, a conscious choice made by Barron. A quote from Barron from the same Hollywood Reporter discussion. "The films that I loved, there was a sense of humor but a sense of peril, of real peril, of grounded peril, like something that had repercussions for what you did but had a wonderful sense of fun with it." I think that Barron perfectly captured that level of balance he was going for. The comedic moments didn't feel out of place and the moments with weight were well executed. Those emotional moments were assisted by Jim Henson's Creature Shop. There were mainly 2 suits constructed for each turtle, one for general stunts that only had some minor animatronics, and another with all the animatronics for the facial expressions. The team at Jim Henson's Creature Shop blended puppeteering and animatronics to properly convey the emotions that needed to be performed by the turtles. I think that the suits, even from the late 80s, still hold up. There are a few moments where you can kind of see the cracks, but that never takes away from the experience. And it's the only movie to make me feel emotional for a rat. The movie is basically an origin story for the Turtles, though they don't take the usual approach. Steve Barron said that he was inspired by Tim Burton's take on Batman in the 1989 film that just came out. In both movies, they kind of take their approach the same way to the first movie of their character. We're already introduced to them actively performing as a vigilante, and then we get flashbacks later referring to their origins. The opening credits did a great job to establishing the world and the criminal element that is currently pillaging New York City. New York City itself is so real and 80s pop punk, a bit raw and dirty, an appropriate aesthetic for this movie. The production design really lends itself to the kind of atmosphere it's trying to create in each scene and for each character, only elevated by the great score that's in this movie, especially for Shredder. April O'Neil is a news reporter, something picked up from the cartoon, and her focus is the crime wave that is suspected to be committed by the mysterious Foot Clan. The setup of the Foot Clan is very well done. We see how they operate, the effect they have on the city, and the kinds of people they have in their ranks, teenage boys. The theming of brotherhood and family in this movie is properly contrasted between the Turtles and the Foot Clan. The main protagonist is basically Raphael. The movie shows us that he is distant, lost, not only from the world above, but also from his own brothers. This isolation leads him to feeling alone, and that leads him to being enraged, which only isolates him more. Splinter tries to be a proper father and teacher by swearing to his son that he is not alone, as he will always have his brothers. He raises his sons with compassion and trust that they will learn from his lessons, each in their own way and in their own time. Shredder and his second-in-command, Tatsu, abuse and manipulate the lost teenage boys, who just want a place to be where they don't feel like a disappointment. It's an interesting theme that I think is very well executed in this movie, especially between Raphael and the secondary protagonist, Danny, who has a pretty good journey as a character. We see how he's fallen under the lies of Shredder. We see him betray the Turtles' trust, but later redeem himself by saving Splinter, now knowing what real family looks like. There was also a sense of not really missing someone or knowing how much you needed that someone until they're gone. The Turtles are absolutely devastated when Splinter is kidnapped. This distance strengthens the relationships and character of the Turtles, now knowing how to be without a master and only having one another. The movie does slow itself down around the middle after Splinter gets kidnapped and the Turtles retreat to April's country home, though I think it was appropriate for them to have a moment to reflect on their current situation and their future plans. They could have stayed in New York and been more aggressively proactive, but I think that's the opposite direction of what Splinter would have wanted them to go in and might have made the movie feel longer. The hour and a half went by really well. The retreat might have slowed it down, but it didn't feel like a drag. I think that the simplicity of the story and the care put into the execution makes the movie one of those timeless classics among comic book movies. The four characters are pretty distinct from one another in general pop culture. Leo leads, Donnie does machines, Raph is cool but rude, Mikey is a party dude, and so on and so forth. This movie does a pretty good job at keeping those distinguishing attributes. Leo has fun with his brothers, but still tries to immaturely aspire to the kind of balance of serenity and emotion that Splinter has accomplished. Raph mentions that Leo is the leader, though even with Leo's type of personality in the movie, I don't think that's fully displayed. Most of the character moments don't happen in the action scenes. Leo was a good leader in the conversational moment, and his best moments are, of course, opposite of Raph. They always work well across from one another. Leo had already lost his father, and now the brother that he has always argued with is badly injured. It puts it all in perspective for him. I think that the retreat was Leo's time to shine. It makes sense that Raph would hold focus for when the story is in the chaotic city where all the action is, and then Leo gets the attention when we have a moment of reflection and concentration. Raph was the right choice to be the main protagonist, since he kind of represents the majority of teenage boys. Angry that they're not left alone, angry when they are left alone, just so many conflicting feelings that need a proper outlet of expression. Splinter gives him that outlet through ninjutsu and the pursuit of vigilante justice, and he tries to give him the proper environment by reminding him that he has family around him. Raph feels isolated from the public above the sewer and from his own family. This makes him disguise himself to walk among the people just to feel he belongs somewhere, being someone he's not, similar to the teens in the Foot Clan. Mikey is mainly the comedic relief among already comedic characters, but he has a sense of innocence with immaturity that allows him to coast along without any real depth in his character. I think it's only Donnie that gets a bit shortchanged because the closest he gets to a machine is repairing the truck with Casey. I don't think they went full enough of him being a nerd, but I think his character is still good enough to be distinguished among his brothers. Splinter is well adapted. The voice and puppet work execute the core of the character very well. Wise, patient, forgiving. Even when confronted with his master's killer, he doesn't let him die as he believes in justice, instead allowing his enemy to suffer the consequences of his own actions, the action of losing yourself to your pain. April is a good character for the audience to be introduced into the world while also being her own character as well. She keeps her integrity throughout the movie. She feels realistic in her interactions and her reactions. Her own pursuit of justice by constantly pressuring the police to act on the current issue that is affecting everyone across the city perfectly sets her up to be a respectable ally to the Turtles. Casey Jones is pretty rad. I think they try to have him be more intense than the Turtles when Raph prevents him from beating on the purse snatchers, but he never really crosses any lines. I don't feel that the initial meeting between Raph and Casey warranted the kind of classic friendship between the characters, but once he is introduced to the other characters, I think he flows really well with the rest of the cast. Casey and April are great regular people characters in such an irregular world. The relationship can feel a bit hostile, but the quieter moments between them really work. I also like the idea that the crime wave would bring out a vigilante like Casey, a goon who's probably just looking for a fight. The main antagonist of Shredder really works. The scene where he's officially introduced is done in such an epic way. Similar to Darth Vader, he just has a heavy, evil presence. He keeps that presence throughout the rest of the movie. He's terrifying whenever he's on screen. And again, his score is fantastic for him. It just builds up the character so much as evil. And when we learn more about him, he only gets scarier as we see the immoral acts he's already committed. He's an imposing threat for Splinter and the Turtles. I've always been a fan of this movie. I believe it's a great adaptation, especially considering how much effort was put into bringing it onto screen. I also love the aesthetic of the movie. It was made in the twilight of the 80s, so it gives that kind of out of time look. I do like Secrets of the Ooze, but I don't think any other live action TMNT movie has been as good as this one. The only other good movie I would say is in animation with the 2007 TMNT movie. Viacom currently holds the rights to the Turtles, producing shows on Nickelodeon and producing the live-action CGI movies with Michael Bay, and those were not good. I hope they try something new with the Turtles in a live-action movie. The Turtles have been battered over the decades with notes from studios and executives so they can get the biggest profit, but I think what made this movie work so well is that there were people at the core of this movie who were passionate about it. They cared about the source material, they cared about finding the best ways to adapt it from one art medium to another and making it stand on its own through that adaptation. Some people say they want the Turtles to return to edgy and gritty, like how it was in its origin. But I think that the movie perfectly balances the two and shows that you can have fun but still have serious moments. It's not what only makes it good, it makes it relatable, and it makes it timeless.